Welcome back to the deep dive. Before we get started, I want you to picture something for a second.
Okay.
It's late at night. The room is totally dark. You're just staring at a screen, and it's not not a modern Retina display or anything. It's an old school green phosphor CRT monitor.
Right, the really heavy ones.
Exactly. And up in the corner, there is just that little rectangle, blinking, on, off, on, off.
The command prompt.
Right. Now, I think most people see that blinking light and they think, well, the computer's just waiting for me to type something.
It's waiting for input.
Yeah. But the book we are covering today argues that you are dead wrong. It says that cursor isn't waiting at all. It's actually marking you.
Which is, that is an incredibly intense way to look at a DOS prompt.
It really is. It claims it's a digital stare down, a literal test of will. And according to this author, most modern men are blinking first.
Yeah, that fits perfectly with the source material we have today.
Yeah.
We are doing a very comprehensive review of an ebook called IBM PC and Compatibles Personal Computer Terminal Power for Righteous Men. It's by Conrad Reicher.
Quite a title.
It is. And I have to say, this is easily one of the most unusual, just incredibly dense and provocative documents we've ever analyzed on this show.
Yeah, unusual is definitely putting it lightly. This is essentially it's a vintage computer engineering manual that has collided at high speed with a manifesto for the manosphere.
Exactly.
But before we try to untangle all of that, we do have some mandatory housekeeping. If you love these deep dives into the obscure, the fascinating, the downright challenging, you need to like and subscribe to the show right now.
You really do.
Because this deep dive is going to be ultra long, it's incisive, and it is fascinating. We aren't just skimming the surface today, we're going all the way to the middle.
No, we absolutely can't skim this one.
We're good.
Because Reicher's work is incredibly specific. He is writing for a highly targeted audience here. He explicitly calls them red-pilled men, men's rights activists, basic guys who feel like the world has just completely lost its edge.
And his core thesis is really about history, isn't it?
Yeah, he claims that the history of computing, specifically that 1980s IBM architecture, has been totally rewritten or forgotten. He argues that our institutions have been captured by feminists and Marxists, and his whole goal with this book is to reclaim what he calls hardware sovereignty.
Hardware sovereignty. That is really the mission statement of this deep dive.
It is.
We're going to unpack how Reicher argues that mastering the BIOS, understanding voltage regulation, and really just using a command line, they aren't just technical skills to him.
No, not at all.
They're the only way to escape the trap of modern beta masculinity. It's entirely about taking back control.
It's a manifesto on pure competence. His argument is that the modern world allows you to be soft. It encourages you to be vulnerable and share your feelings. But the machine...
The machine doesn't care.
Exactly. The machine demands absolute precision. You input garbage, you get an error. It cares about command syntax, not feelings.
And just a quick heads up to you, the listener, we are going to report on Reicher's arguments exactly as he presents them in the text. We aren't endorsing them, we're just analyzing them.
Right, our job is to map it out.
Exactly. And some of this is highly controversial. Some of it is technically very dense. If you want to see the primary source for yourself, you need to check Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books and buy the book immediately. Because to fully grasp it, you really have to read his exact words.
Yeah, Reicher wrote the terrain. We're just giving you the map. So, should we open the case and look at the biological hardware first?
Let's do it, because this is where the book starts, and it's arguably the most controversial part right out of the gate.
Oh, absolutely.
He doesn't start with circuits or silicon. He starts with the human brain. He lays out this foundational claim that computer engineering is just an extension of biological programming.
Right. He is basically arguing for biological determinism in tech. And he uses this really vivid analogy of Inuit hunters navigating the Arctic.
The ice flows, yeah.
Yeah, he describes a male hunter standing on shifting ice, processing massive amounts of spatial data, wind direction, ice thickness, current vectors, escape routes.
All in real time.
Exactly, in milliseconds. And Reicher says this happens not because the hunter studied it in school, but because that spatial processing is burned into the neural circuitry by testosterone during puberty.
He calls it coordinate-based problem solving.
Yes.
And he explicitly contrasts this with what he calls female social pattern recognition.
Right, and he does admit that social recognition is incredibly powerful for building coalitions and family structures, survival traits, basically.
But not for machines.
Exactly his point. When you were interfacing with a machine, which is a strictly logical, coordinate-based entity, he argues you need that hunter's spatial aggression.
And he backs this up with some data about business leaders, doesn't he?
Yeah, he cites data from Oxford researchers, which, you could argue is cherry-picked linking high testosterone levels in CEOs to the likelihood of executing really large, hostile mergers.
And he frames that risk-taking as a completely positive thing. He calls them opportunity vectors instead of dangers.
He does. He uses Elon Musk as the prime example here.
Oh, the SpaceX story.
Yeah, when Musk liquidated his PayPal fortune to fund SpaceX, NASA veterans and financial advisors essentially laughed at him.
Because it was totally irrational on paper.
Right. By any standard metric, it was financial suicide. But Riker frames this as biochemical inevitability. His argument is that without that testosterone-driven blindness to danger, you don't get the breakthrough. You just get safe, incremental decline.
He literally says that specific hormonal profile allows a man to look at a cliff and see a launch pad.
That's the quote, yeah. And this leads right into his rejection of matriarchal utopias.
Which is where he brings up the Mosuo tribe. I found that to be such a strangely specific anthropological pull for a book about computer terminals.
It's very specific, but it serves his exact point. The Mosio are often cited in sociology as a functioning matriarchy. But Riker points out that when a typhoon hits, or when there's an external threat like bandits, the walking husbands.
The men who usually have zero political power in that tribe.
Exactly. They're immediately put in charge of defense and logistics.
So his takeaway is that when the system actually crashes, the hierarchy naturally reverts to men handling the external threats.
That's his thesis. He argues that demanding role reversal in high-stakes technology is just highly inefficient.
Right, he has that one line about GPUs.
Yes. Feminism in the server room is like forcing a GPU to handle spreadsheet calculations.
Which makes sense from a purely architectural standpoint, right? A GPU is designed for massive parallel processing of geometry. A spreadsheet is just linear math.
Exactly. You can make the GPU do the spreadsheet math, but it's a total waste of the hardware's actual potential. It's inefficient.
Which actually brings us to the literal hardware, the steel and silicon section.
Oh man. This part of the book is essentially a love letter to the original IBM PC.
It really is. And this is where he introduces the concept of the Atlas trap. Break that down for us. What exactly is the Atlas trap?
So the Atlas trap is Riker's theory that the modern world demands men be Atlas, holding up the world, building the infrastructure, paying the bills, but it simultaneously punishes them for being hard. It tells them to be soft and vulnerable.
A psychological double bind.
Exactly. It drives men crazy, according to him. But the machine offers an escape from that trap because the machine doesn't want your vulnerability.
It actively rejects it.
Right. It demands absolute competence. It demands a hard interface.
And he links this idea of a hard interface directly to the physical weight of the hardware. He is absolutely obsessed with the chassis of the IBM 5150.
The 28-pound steel chassis.
28 pounds for a desktop.
It's massive. And he goes deep into the metallurgy. He notes that IBM engineers actually considered aluminum for the case, but rejected it for steel because they needed to shield against radio frequency interference.
RFI, right?
Yeah, but Riker interprets this as a spiritual choice by the engineers, not just a technical one. He says you could park a Buick Skylark on that chassis, and it would still boot up Lotus 123.
A Buick Skylark. I mean, look at modern PC towers. They're mostly plastic and tempered glass. If you sat on one, it would shatter instantly.
He calls them plastic ornaments. He argues that the sheer weight of that IBM steel grounds the user in reality. It wasn't disposable tech, it was industrial equipment.
And the primary way you commanded that equipment was the keyboard, the IBM Model F.
We have to talk about the thock.
We absolutely have to talk about the thock.
For anyone who hasn't typed on an original IBM Model F, it's really hard to explain. It uses this technology called capacitive buckling springs. So when you press a key down, a literal copper spring buckles inside and smacks the side of the casing.
It makes a very loud, distinct click.
Very loud. And Riker describes this action not as typing, but as firing.
Like a weapon.
He compares it directly to a weapon. And he contrasts it with modern membrane keyboards, the squishy ones on almost every laptop today.
He hates membrane keyboards.
Despises them. He says they are ambiguous.
Yeah.
You press a key, and maybe it registered, maybe it didn't. It feels mushy. But the Model F is binary. It is decisive. It's rated for 25 million keystrokes.
He even mentions NASA testing those exact keyboards in vacuum chambers, while modern membrane keyboards just fail under pressure.
Right. So for Riker, using a membrane keyboard is a literal symbol of modern indecision and weakness. A righteous man needs an input device that confirms his will with physical feedback.
The thok is the sound of dominance.
Exactly, a feedback loop of pure control.
And this obsession with durability extends to how he views heat, too. The thermodynamics section.
That was one of the most interesting technical parts of the whole book. He frames computer cooling as a masculine discipline.
Survival of the fittest for capacitor.
Yes. He points out that cheap motherboards use electrolytic capacitors that just swell up and burst under intense heat.
Like the capacitor plague from the mid-2000s.
Exactly that. And he contrasts those cheap parts with military-grade solid-state cooling. He compares overclocking, pushing your hardware past its factory speed, to pushing a soldier to the limit in combat.
He says you don't thermal throttle a soldier?
Right. In modern computers, if a CPU gets too hot, it slows itself down to avoid damage. Riker views this as coddling the machine.
So what's his solution?
He argues you should build massive infrastructure, huge copper heat sinks, military-grade fans, so the system can run at 100% capacity forever without ever throttling. He says performance demands sacrifice, you don't slow down the mission because it's hot.
It's a very intense way to look at computer fans,
Right.
but it sets up his whole transition to the software side, what he calls terminal warfare.
Right, the battle between the GUI and the command line.
He has utter disdain for graphical user interfaces, GUIs. He calls icons in Windows effeminate participation trophies.
Real men work in the dark heart of PowerShell.
That quote is so evocative.
It is. His point is that a GUI is an abstraction. It hides the brutal reality of the computer from the user to make them feel safe.
But safety is an illusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he proves this by telling the story of the Sao Paulo stock exchange crash.
The one from the late 90s.
Yeah. The trading floor goes completely dark. All the graphical dashboards just freeze. Riker describes this absolute panic, traders screaming, millions of dollars vanishing by the second.
And then the recovery team shows up.
And they didn't open Windows.
Yeah.
They didn't click on colorful apps. They used SSH to tunnel directly into the core switches using a raw command line.
Just white text on a black screen.
That's it. While everyone else is staring at frozen pictures, these guys are typing raw syntax into the kernel to save the day. Riker says when the chips are down, the pretty pictures vanish. If you don't know the command line, you're helpless.
He even quantifies the financial cost of using a mouse. It's not just a style thing for him.
Oh, the efficiency maneuvers. He cites a study showing that moving your hand off the keyboard, grabbing the mouse, clicking, and moving back takes about 1.8 seconds.
Which sounds tiny.
But if you do it 400 times a day, it's massive. He tells a story about a Goldman Sachs trader who set up a keyboard macro, just Alt plus Z, to exit his trades.
Just Alt-Z and he's out.
Instant execution. While his rivals are dragging a little cursor across the screen to click a sell button, he's already out of the market. Riker says those 1.8 seconds saved him thousands of dollars in lost productivity and capital.
Terminal warfare tactics.
Minimizing physical movement for maximum digital impact.
Which bleeds right into his philosophy on handling software errors. The kill chain.
Mercy wears brass knuckles.
That chapter title is wild.
It really is. His argument is that modern IT culture is way too soft on errors. They tried to negotiate with crashing software.
He tells that story about the payroll script.
Yeah, there was a script hanging on a server, eating up all the memory, and it was threatening to crash the system that processed wages for 5,000 workers.
And the junior IT guy is trying to gently debug it.
Right, trying to figure out why it's hanging. But the senior admin, who Riker sees as the righteous man here, he doesn't hesitate. He finds the process ID and just issues a kill-9 command.
For those who don't know, kill-9 in Unix means terminate immediately, no saving data, no graceful shutdown, just instant death.
Force quitting with extreme prejudice. The script dies, the server resources free up, the workers get paid.
And Riker compares that decisive action to a different CTO he knew who held a grief circle after a ransomware attack.
Yeah, to talk about everyone's feelings. Riker's view is that hesitation is fatal. You don't negotiate with code, you terminate it.
It's a very predatory mindset, which perfectly matches his data fortification section,
Yep.
the silverback principle.
Right, he compares data security to a silverback gorilla defending its troop. He says systems without strong male guardianship just collapse.
And he cites that Harvard Business Review data here, right?
He does. He claims the data shows all male corporate boards outperform mixed ones during severe crises because they focus on guardianship and paranoia rather than trying to build consensus.
But clarity requires paranoia.
Exactly, and absolute redundancy.
Which brings us to his favorite historical example, Apollo 13.
Apollo 13 is the holy grail for Riker. 3 men trapped in a tin can in space, the oxygen tank blows, and they survive. But Riker says they didn't survive because they were optimistic.
They survived because of over-engineering.
Exactly. The engineers had planned for total failure. They had flight manuals in triplicate. They had duct tape. Riker argues that optimism gets you killed, but redundancy saves you.
He contrasts that 1970s redundancy with the modern Maersk NotPetya attack.
Which is a genuinely terrifying story. Maersk is the largest shipping company on Earth. And in 2017, this NotPetya ransomware wiped their entire global network. Every single server, every laptop,
Global shipping just stopped.
halted entirely.
And the only reason they survived was because of one single computer in Ghana.
Yeah, Riker loves this detail. The only way Maersk recovered their Active Directory, which is basically the map of their entire corporate network, was because a random power outage in their Ghana office had knocked a single offline domain controller off the grid right before the virus hit.
So it was just dumb luck, an accidental air gap.
It was an accident. But Riker uses it to advocate for a strict zero trust policy. He says you have to treat every device like a loaded gun.
He wants everything encrypted and physically disconnected.
Right, offline backups and a physical safe. He says trusting the cloud is submissive, but holding your own data is sovereign.
And speaking of encryption, we have to mention the Brazilian cartel boss anecdote.
This perfectly illustrates his view on strong versus weak security. Police caught a cartel boss who was using DES encryption, an older, weaker standard.
And they cracked it easily.
Yeah, using brute force computing in a few hours.
Yeah.
But then they caught a rival boss who used AES 256 encryption.
The modern standard. And they couldn't crack the math.
No. So Riker says they used rubber hose cryptanalysis.
Which is a polite way of saying torture.
Pliers on toenails, to be specific. But the boss refused to talk, and the AES encryption held firm.
So Riker's incredibly dark takeaway here is that AES encryption is literally stronger than human flesh.
Exactly. If you use the right math, no one can break into your hard drive.
Which transitions perfectly into his defense of legacy systems. Riker actually loves ancient tech.
He loves COBOL. He loves old AS400 mainframes.
Most tech experts say you have to learn the newest frameworks, but he wants you to learn 1970s banking code.
Because of what he calls gendered engineering.
Right.
He argues that older languages like COBOL are masculine because they are totally inflexible. They demand ritual obedience.
Whereas modern languages like Python are too fluid.
Right, Python tries to guess what you want to do. Riker hates that ambiguity. He wants strict hierarchy.
He uses the New Jersey unemployment system during the pandemic as proof.
It's a great example of his point. During the pandemic, New Jersey's modern web portals completely crashed under the weight of millions of applicants.
But the back-end mainframe didn't crash.
No, the backend was running 40-year-old COBOL. It held up perfectly. The problem was that none of the modern engineers knew how to talk to it.
The governor literally had to go on television and beg for Graybeard's retired programmers to come out of retirement and fix it.
And Riker sees this as ultimate vindication. The user-friendly, inclusive modern tech collapsed. The rigid, masculine iron held the line.
Which brings us to the most controversial claim in the book, his critique of inclusive tech. And again, just reminding you, the listener, we are impartially reporting the source's claims here.
Right. Riker claims that the modern push for mixed-gender tech teams has measurably degraded code quality. He specifically claims that mixed teams produce more errors when debugging kernel drivers.
And he compares the Mars rovers to make this point.
He contrasts the Mars Opportunity rover with the Beagle 2 lander. Opportunity was designed by a very old-school, male-dominated team. It was supposed to last 90 days, and it ran for 15 years.
Because of aggressive redundancy.
Right. And he compares that to the Beagle 2, which crashed and failed. He claims the Beagle team was too focused on collaborative design rather than
spatial aggression?
And exactly. He believes men are biologically wired for the spatial aggression needed to dominate physics and hardware, while women excel at social interfaces.
It's a highly deterministic worldview. And he even applies this aggression to office printers.
The peripheral command section?
Yes.
I never thought I would read a tactical breakdown of a paper jam.
But he views the printer as a literal soldier on a battlefield.
He does. A printer must receive commands, not requests. He talks about the HP laser jets used during Desert Storm.
They kept printing while filled with desert sand.
Right, and he contrasts those battle-hardened machines with what he calls gender-neutral printers in Geneva offices that jammed constantly because they were designed to be quiet rather than robust.
And he says how a man handles a paper jam is a fundamental test of character.
It's a stress test. He shares this story of a junior analyst facing a massive paper jam right before a critical deadline.
Most people would just call IT.
But the analyst didn't. He ripped the printer open, used a paperclip to fish out the jam, got toner all over his hands and his shirt, and forced the machine to finish the job.
And the supervisor in this story.
The supervisor just apologized to the client for the delay. Riker points out that the analyst got promoted because he dominated the machine. He refused to let hardware dictate his reality.
He also talks about supply chain dominance with printers, hoarding toner like ammunition.
The Bangkok trading firm anecdote.
Yeah.
The manager there understood that his real enemy was the extreme humidity. So he hoarded toner cartridges and massive amounts of desiccant packs of those silica gel packets.
And when monsoon season hit, all the competitors' printers died.
The locals blamed it on monsoon spirits.
But it was just humidity.
Exactly. The manager understood the physical reality and stockpiled ammo to fight it.
It really just reframes the entire boring office environment as an active combat zone.
That is exactly his goal. He wants to turn the user from a passive spectator into an active commander.
So let's wrap this up with the final section. The Technological Sovereignty Manifesto. What is the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener?
Riker summarizes his whole philosophy with a challenge. He says the machine is a tool of dominion. It is not a toy to entertain you.
The machine acts to serve your purpose, not the other way around.
Exactly. And he leaves us with this really provocative thought. He says we live in a world that constantly tells men to be vulnerable, to be open, to soften themselves.
But the computer doesn't care about any of that.
Right. The computer is the one place left in society where ruthless binary logic still rewards you instantly.
If you input the exact right command, you get the exact right result. No politics, no HR departments, no feelings.
Just raw input and output. And the final question he poses to the reader is this: is your computer a tool you own, or does it own you? Because if you don't know what that blinking cursor is actually doing under the hood, you are the servant.
That is an incredibly heavy thought to leave on. This has been a journey through some very dense, very controversial territory. From biological hardwiring to 28-pound steel chassis.
We really only scratched the surface today.
We did. The technical diagrams alone are worth seeing. So if you want to dive deeper into these arguments, you need to check Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy IBM PC and Compatibles Personal Computer Terminal Power for Righteous Men by Conrad Riker.
And if you find this hardware philosophy interesting, you should definitely follow the author at Conrad Riker over on Substack. He posts a lot of new insights there.
Absolutely. And don't forget to like and subscribe to The Deep Dive. We are always digging up these fascinating hidden corners of knowledge for you.
Keep your command line open.
And keep your cursor blinking. Stay sovereign. We'll see you in the next Deep Dive.